is kept via the establishment of 10 guilds, alliances formed of lesser folk under the watchful eye of a powerful Perun, heading each guild. To establish these guilds, the Peruns, incredibly powerful beings aligned with different colors of mana, would set statutes and ordinances for each guild so that every aspect of society would have a neat and established place and purpose, and in order to ultimately maintain control of the citizenry on the cityscape world of Ravnica. One such Perun, Svogther, heralded dominion over the Golgari Guild, a guild whose dominion was that of life, death, and pestilence. Originally usurped by the Gorgon Sisters of Stone Death, Savra Vad Savo would team up with the guild's original Perun after reviving him through necromantic magics in order to take control of the Golgari Guild back from the usurpers. After this, however, Savra would betray Svogther and establish complete dominion over the Golgari Guild. Savra, however, was only a pawn in a greater game played by Lord Sazdek of the Demir Guild, once thought to be completely annihilated and left the annals of Ravnican history. Sazdek, who upon getting every bit of political power he needed due to Savra's machinations, betrayed her by snapping her neck and leaving her body to be possessed by the spirit of the original Perun Svogther, who would inhabit flesh once again. Savra's body was eventually destroyed during a cataclysmic battle between Rakdos, Lord of the Rakdos Guild, and the Simic experiment Kraj.
What? I was just brewing up a deck about Savra, the $15 deck. Please don't talk about what happened in the comment section. Anyways, for those of you who are still here and not talking about things that happened, we are going to be talking today about one of my favorite commanders of all time, Savra, who I was not able to build for the $15 challenge until Ravnica Remastered came out. So thank God for reprints. Let's go ahead and take a look at her and see what she does. So Savra is a Golgari commander, 2/2, and she costs 4 mana total. Whenever you sacrifice a black creature, you can pay 2 life, and if you do, each other player sacks a creature. If you sack a green creature, you can then gain 2 life. So basically, this is a Grave Pact we get to put in our command zone. And if you've ever played any deck that has Grave Pact or Dictate of Erebos, this is an incredibly powerful commander. And you might have to ask permission before dropping this on the table with any of your friends. Just saying from experience, depending on how you build the deck, it may end up not being very fun for some of the newer players at the table, because anytime your commander is on the board, you basically have dominion over who lives, who dies, and who gets to keep creatures on the board. Spellslinger decks can kind of function while Savra's out, and Super Friends decks can kind of function while Savra's out, but most creature-based decks kind of just suffer while she's on the board. Let's go ahead and talk about why that is. We're going to be building her as an aristocrat commander with a focus on summoning green and black tokens and then sacrificing them so that we can gain the benefit of her destroying all of our opponent's creatures' ability, but we won't be suffering too much under the side effect of killing those creatures, making ourselves lose 2 life. We're actually going to be gaining a lot of life from our own green creatures. But let's go ahead and take a look at our deck and see, first of all, how we're going to be ramping to get to what the deck wants to do. So let's take a look first at the ramping section of the deck, starting with Scampering Surveyor. 4 mana, 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. The reason we are running something like this is because a lot of our ramp, we want to be creature-based, because we want to be sacrificing those creatures afterwards. We want all of our cards to pull double duty in here if we can help it. We also have Solemn Simulacrum, who's just a stronger version of that, but also gives us a draw when it's sacrificed. Of course, we have Honored Heirloom in the deck, so that I have the ability to tell other graveyard players that I'm the only one allowed to play graveyard cards at the table, and they need to understand that. Then we have Farhaven Elf and Wood Elves to get a forest and a basic land out of the deck respectively, while leaving us with a body on the board to sacrifice. Then we have Search for Tomorrow to get a basic land out of our deck untapped. We also get the ability to play this card on turn 1 for its suspend cost, so that's really important. Growth Spasm gets a land out of our deck and then also leaves us with a body on the board to abuse with our various sacrifice outlets. Lana Ward Dead is a Golgari creature who can tap for black. Now, normally you don't want to run 2 mana creatures in your mana dork slot, but Lana Ward Dead offers us something very unique in that it is a black and green card, so if we sack it while Savra is on the board, we gain all of the benefits of Savra with this card in particular. And then we have Rampant Growth, search your library for a basic land card, and put that card onto the battlefield tap. So these are very, very basic. This is how we're going to ramp up to playing not only Savra, but some of the other stuff we have in the deck that costs a lot. And honestly, some of the cards that cost the most in our deck are actually in our draw engine. So if you look at our draw engine here, we've got 9 cards in the dedicated draw slot, starting with Nasty N. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sack a creature, draw 2 cards. If the sacrifice creature was legendary, draw 3 cards instead. Now, that's actually really important because Savra does not say when you sack another black creature or another green creature. So we can sacrifice our own commander to this when we need to wipe the board of creatures. Like, everybody's just got their commander on the board, and that's about it for whatever reason. We just go ahead and crack Savra to the nasty end. We draw 3. Everybody loses a creature. We lose no life, because she is both of the colors that you care about. It works out amazingly. And then, of course, we have more draw power in the deck. We have Altar's Reap. Sack a creature to draw 2 cards, which, of course, will trigger Savra, and it's at instant speed. Costly Plunder. Sack a creature or an artifact to draw 2 cards. Reckoner's Bargain. Sack a creature to draw 2 cards, and then gain life equal to its mana value. And Village Rites. Another sack a creature, draw 2 cards. So if you notice, a lot of our draw engine, we really want to be gaining benefits. We want to gain double duty off all of our cards. We want our draw cards to not only give us cards out of our deck, but we want them to make certain that all of our cards are being sacrificed so that Savra can see them, and make sure that we end up keeping the board nice and clean. We want the board nice and tidy. We also have Harmonize and Ambition's Cost as 4 mana draw 3 spells. Very basic, very generic, but still very useful. And we've got Ramp in here. We are a green deck. We will be able to cast these both on curve and late into the game without too much problem. And then finally, the more costly cards of the bunch, we have Death Reap Ritual and Moldavine Reclamation, both of which give us draw power off of creature deaths. Death Reap Ritual does it once per turn, but it does it when anybody loses a creature, and Moldavine does it only when we lose a creature, but it gives us 1 every single time a creature dies. So we can draw a crap ton of cards off of Moldavine Reclamation. Now, we mentioned sacrificing a whole bunch of creatures. How are we going to actually win our game? Well, it is a aristocrat deck, so we need to talk about the aristocrats who are in the deck, starting with Dina Soulsteeper, who I may or may not simp for almost, if not more, than Savra. But again, that you didn't see that. None of that happened. Anyway, Dina here is a 2 mana creature who also acts as a sack outlet for us. We can pay 1 to sack a creature, give her Exo until end of turn, where X is the creature's power. And whenever we gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. So if Savra is on the board, Savra is going to make Dina burn everybody for 1 every time we sack a creature. And then we have Marauding Blight Priest, which also makes everybody burn for 1 whenever we gain life, which again, Moldavine Reclamation is giving us that life gain. Reckoner's Bargain is giving us that life gain. We're getting that life gain off of Savra. We're pinging it off of Dina, off of Marauding Blight Priest. But we're also gaining life off of things like Zulaport Cutthroat. Whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain a life. Falconwrath Noble. Whenever a creature dies, target player loses a life and we gain a life. We have Vindictive Vampire. Whenever another creature dies, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then you gain 1 life. And then, of course, we have Nadir's Nightblade. Anytime a token we have leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So if any of these aristocrats are on the board with Marauding Blight Priest or Dina, and Savra's out, we get to just magnify the damage we're doing massively. When we sack creatures, Falconwrath Noble will see it, or Zulaport Cutthroat will see it, burn everybody for 1, make you gain 1, but you sacked a creature, so Savra's probably going to be gaining you 2, so you're gaining 3 life. And then Dina sees both of those instances of life gain and goes, okay, I can burn everybody for 2. So every time we sack a creature, everybody burns for a nice clean 3 damage. That ramps up quickly. You only have to sacrifice 10 creatures at that point to put everybody at the table in critical range. Like once you're sitting at about 10 or below life against an aristocrat deck, you kind of just accept that the game's over, because at instant speed, they can make sure that you are not going to live the rest of the turn. But there's other ways an aristocrat player can keep you down, by not just by making sure your life total stays really, really low. No. We have access to a ton of interaction. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Containment Breach, we can blow up an artifact or enchantment at sorcery speed, and if the mana value of the card we blow up is 2 or less, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token. When the creature dies, it gains a life. All pests have that ability. When they die, you gain a life. So again, Dina Soulsteeper is out on the board. You have a pest on the board, right? You sack the pest. The pest is black and green. If Dina is on the board and Zulaport is on the board, you burn them for 1 for the Zulaport, and then you gain 1 from the pest, 1 from the Zulaport, and 2 from the Savra. And then Dina sees all of that and goes, oh, that was 3 instances of life gain? You killed a pest. Burn for 4 damage. Burn for 1 from the Cutthroat, or 1 from the Vindictive Vampire, or whatever you've got on the board, and then Dina or Marauding Blight Priest get to push that even further. Every single thing in the deck that says you gain 1 life basically turns into a little pistol that we can just ping people repeatedly. It's beautiful. And then, of course, in the interaction section, we also have one of my favorite packages in all of Magic the Gathering, the Fleshbag Marauder clone. So Fleshbag Marauder, when it enters the battlefield, it makes everybody sacrifice a creature, and he is black. So if Savra's on the board, this actually reads everybody sacrifices 2 creatures. You sack 1, everybody else sacrifices 2. Then we have Chain Devil, same effect basically, but it's for non-tokens. Demon's Disciple, same effect, but if they have a Planeswalker on the board instead of a creature, it kills that too. Merciless Executioner makes everybody sack a creature. Plaguecrafter makes everybody sack a creature, or discard a card, or get rid of a Planeswalker, depending on what they have on the board and available. And then, of course, we have Siphon Flesh, which will make everybody sack a creature, and then you make a 2/2 black zombie creature token for every card that every other player sacrificed, which then you can sacrifice those tokens, and as they are black, that will lead to more creatures dying on your opponent's board, because every time we lose a black creature, we lose 2 life, and our opponents lose a creature. So every time we lose 1 black creature, our opponents lose 3 creatures total, 1 for each of them. And then we have, of course, Canker Bloom, one of my favorite cards to come out of recent Magic the Gathering. We can sack it to blow up an artifact, proliferate, or blow up an enchantment. It's green, so it's going to give us life gain, which, of course, Dina and Marauding Blight Priest will see while Savra's out. Then we have Deadly Brew. We make everybody sack a creature, just like with the Merciless Executioners and Fleshbag Marauders. And then if we sack a permanent this way ourselves, we can return any permanent from our grave back into our hand. But, oh, by the way, what's Power Creep look like? It looks like Rise of the Witch King. Each player sacks a creature, and then if you sacked a creature this way, you can return any permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield instead. So some of our bigger cards, like, say, this Overseer of the Damned right here, which is a 7-mana creature, which we're going to cheat in with things like Rise of the Witch King. When the Overseer of the Damned enters the battlefield, we get to destroy any target creature, and then if a non-token creature dies on our opponent's turns, we make a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So here's what's gonna happen. Overseer of the Damned touches the board. We blow up 1 creature, and we make 1 zombie, and our opponents are a little miffed at that, and then we go, that's fine, that's fine. Here's the next thing. I'm gonna play Merciless Executioner. You all have to sacrifice a creature. Overseer of the Damned sees 3 of those creatures die. You're going to create 3 tokens. Oh, but wait, it gets a little worse. Savra saw that happen. So you lost a black creature, so I guess they have to sacrifice 2 creatures each. So I guess Overseer of the Damned sees that and creates 6 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. And oh, if we sack any of those tokens, I guess they lose even more creatures. Every black zombie token we sacrifice will turn into 3 zombie tokens, because Savra will see each of the tokens we sack and see that, oh, we're getting rid of a lot of creatures on the board. We're just going to keep creating tokens and tokens and tokens and tokens. Overseer of the Damned does overtime in this deck in terms of power. We also have Mortality Spear, a 4-mana spell that can blow up any non-land permanent at all. And it's 18 cents. This card's fantastic. But if we gain life, which of course like half of our deck does, then it costs 2 less instead. So 2 mana to blow up any non-land permanent. Yeah, I'll take an 18 cents Assassin's Trophy. I will gladly take an 18 cents Assassin's Trophy. We also have Putrefy, which got its price reduced thanks to the recent printings in Ravnica. Destroy any artifact or creature. It cannot be regenerated. Then we have the Skyfisher Spider. When it comes into the battlefield, blow up any non-land permanent if we sack a creature when we play it. So we're going to sack one of our dozens of tokens that we have, blow up a card, and then Savra's going to say, oh, you got rid of a token? The token happened to be black? I guess everybody loses more cards. Oopsie daisy. Oopsie doodles. Didn't mean for that to happen. Also, when the Skyfisher dies, you can gain 1 life for every creature card in your graveyard. And if you do, you exile the spider from your graveyard. So sometimes you will want to do that. Sometimes you'll want to keep him in the graveyard for reanimation. But that does mean that when he dies, we get an extra life gain trigger for things like Dina and Marauding Blight Priest to see. And then we have the Callous Blood Mage. He's an interesting one for us. Anytime he enters the battlefield, you'll make a 1/1 black and green pest token, or you can draw a card and lose 1 life, or you can tell the Reanimator player that they don't get to play Magic the Gathering anymore, and you actually like playing Magic the Gathering more than them because, oh my god, you're going to blow up their entire graveyard. So I do not hate Reanimator players. I swear to God, I don't. I just think it's important to make sure you have the ability to stop them from doing their shit. That's all I'm saying. Honored Heirloom is in the deck, and also this is in the deck. We have 2 ways of getting rid of graveyards if it comes to that. But speaking of graveyards, we have some ways to interact with ours quite a lot. So let's take a look here. Demonic Gifts until end of turn. Whenever a creature we control dies, we can bring it to the battlefield again. We can do that with Supernatural Stamina and Return to Action. So here's a fun scenario, okay? Let's say that, like in most situations, our Commander Savra is on the board. Remember, she says, when we sack a black creature, everybody loses a creature with us. So we play Merciless Executioner. It's on the board now. It's going to auto-sack. Its ability goes on the stack. Before we choose it as a target, we're going to cast Supernatural Stamina for 1 mana on the Merciless Executioner. Now, it will automatically come back onto the board when it dies. So, here's the scenario. It comes onto the board, everybody sacks 1 creature. That's 3 creatures that die. Savra sees that your Merciless Executioner dies, so now 6 creatures are dying. And then it's going to come back to the board because the Supernatural Stamina automatically, that's 9 creatures that get to die. And then Savra sees that. So now 12 creatures get to die. Your opponents get to lose 4 creatures each. You spent 4 mana. You spent 4 mana putting 2 cards together. That's all you had to do. And most of their important cards have now been dismantled from the board. And the worst part is, for each and every one of them, they had to choose each and every time. You don't understand. These people had to choose which of their favorite cards needed to die first. Do you understand how cruel that is? Because if you don't, you should be playing this deck so you can learn how cruel it is and how fun it is to be that cruel. Anyway, also Altar of Baal, one of my personal favorite cards. Exile any of our tokens to get creatures back from our graveyard at sorcery speed. That of Rebirth allows us to get any artifact or creature. Whenever one of those artifacts or creatures we have is put into a graveyard, put an oil counter on it, tap it, and remove 4 oil counters to return any creature from our graveyard back to the battlefield at sorcery speed. So when you're playing Reanimator, 1 reanimation spell is cool, but reanimation that you can do over and over again is even cooler, especially when it's 30 cents and 16 cents respectively. Again, this is a deck we got to build at almost full power for the $15 challenge. It is $15.33 for the entire deck, and 34 of those cents are in Savra. Then we have Dread Return, 4 mana, return any creature from our graveyard to the battlefield, but we have Flashback. We can sack 3 creatures to get this ability again. So again, you have 3 zombie creatures out because of the myriad of ways we have to spawn tokens. We sack those tokens, we get a big creature back out, and then Savra goes, oh, I guess people need to lose 9 cards. I guess that's what we're doing today. Players get to lose 9 cards because nobody gets to have nice things as long as we have Grave Pact on a stick. But it's not the only way we have to get things out of our graveyard. We also have the Golgari Fine Broker. When it enters the battlefield, take any permanent from our grave and put it back to our hand. And then we have the Golgari Guild Mage. For 2 mana, this 2/2 will let you take any creatures from your graveyard and put them back in your hand. By paying 5 mana, and sacking a creature, which will of course trigger Savra and all of our various aristocrats again. I'm telling you, Savra's really, really mean, but it's fine. But speaking of sacrificing, we've shown you a few ways we sack. We sack with this. We have a few creatures that sacrifice things. We have, of course, draw power that sacrifice things. Now let's get to the dedicated sack outlets, of which we have 6. So here is the Dreg Recycler. We can tap it to sack an artifact or a creature to make every opponent lose 1 life, and then you gain 1 life. So you do this, you sack a pest, you gain 2 life, you gain 4 life because Savra is out and the pest gains you. That's 3 instances of life gain. Dina or Marauding Blight Priest is on the board. They see 3 instances of life gain and they go, oh, okay, cool. I guess everybody needed to lose even more life because I just played my deck like a normal person. That's fair. That's fair and balanced Magic the Gathering. And how much is this card? Oh, right, it's Dreg Recycler is a penny. Why is this card a penny? Speaking of cards that are a penny, Phyrexian Ghoul. At instant speed, sack a creature to give it 2/2 until end of turn. So in niche scenarios, we can blow up a bunch of tokens and then turn this card sideways at an opponent to just give them a bloody nose into next week. Or, like we're going to do most of the time, we're just going to hold it onto the board, and every time our opponent plays a creature we don't like, we're going to go, sack a token at instant speed, no cost. Get rid of that creature. I didn't like you playing that creature. You don't understand. We're not playing Magic the Gathering anymore. We're playing Savra the Simpening. Then we have the Alkalite of Alcatraz. Sack any creature to make each opponent lose a life, and you gain a life, so it's another copy of Dreg Recycler for the deck. Then we have Relic Vial. Sack a creature to draw a card. If we happen to have a Cleric, which I don't believe we have too many in the deck, we have the Alkalite of Alcatraz. But other than that, we don't have too many Clerics. But if we do happen to have a Cleric, then anytime a creature dies, we get to add another Aristocrat ability to the mix. Everybody loses a life, and you gain a life. This card shines in decks like Elasil Core, but it's pretty good in here too, just as a sack outlet that draws us cards. Speaking of sack outlets that draw us cards, we have 2 that do that. Tarian's Journal. We get to sack another creature to draw a card at sorcery speed, and then we can pay 2 to discard our hand to transform it into the Tomb of Alcatraz, which says that you can play any creature spells from your graveyard if you give them finality counters. Now, there's an important thing to note about this card. There's a lot of aristocrats that care about things dying, and if things die, they get their triggers. And because the Tomb of Alcatraz, the finality counter creates a replacement effect, where instead of a creature dying, it is then exiled instead as a replacement to the dying action. If you have Savra out, she doesn't care about creatures dying. She specifically cares about sacrifice. So if you see Savra, you pull something out with a finality counter and then you sack it at cost of plunder, even though your aristocrat cards will not see the card die, Savra will see the card get sacrificed, and as a result, you will gain her abilities. So you can use this card to reanimate one of your Fleshbag Marauder clones to get the double sacks off of Savra, and it's just kind of nutty. Tarian's Journal is a great card. And then we have Ravenous Squirrel. It is a 1-mana creature who is importantly a Golgari creature. So if we sacrifice it, we get double triggers off Savra. We can pay 3 to sack any artifact creature we have to gain a life and draw a card. So it's a sack outlet that it itself is good enough to function as its own thing we want to sack. And then we need to get to the important part. We need to get to the token generation. This is where we're going to be creating our armies that we are going to be killing. I've already shown you a couple of the cards we're using for token generation in the removal section, but let's get to the nitty-gritty. Let's talk Pestilent Cauldron. Tap it and discard a card to make a black and green pest token. Do you know why we're playing something like Pestilent Cauldron here? I'll show you. It's because certain cards like Overseer of the Damned cost a lot of mana. And because they cost a lot of mana, we don't want to pay that kind of mana for them. So we're going to discard him to the graveyard using Pestilent Cauldron, making a pest that we're going to use to keep people under control because of Savra, and then we're going to reanimate him with the reanimate cards we showed you earlier. We can also use this to exile cards from people's graveyards and draw cards, so we have even more ways to interact with graveyard players. Again, we like playing from graveyards, but we are the only ones that get to be graveyard players. We are the only ones that get to do this. Nobody else gets to play from their graveyard except us. We are greedy. We are Savra. We are trying to be monarchs taking over guilds in Ravnica. This is very important. It's definitely not because of anime boobies. Anyway, Namada is also in this deck to Make graveyard players hate you even more. If any creature an opponent controls would die, you exile it instead, so you replace all their die triggers. When you do, you create green Saproling tokens. You can also sack Saprolings to draw cards, or to give them out a 2/2. Really, this is just going to sit on the board and tell the Reanimator players, get rid of this, not Savra. Savra doesn't stop you from playing your deck. This stops your deck from working. You want to kill this. Oh, and as you're playing your deck like normal, I guess you're just going to lose a shit ton of creatures because Savra's doing Savra things. I'll make a bunch of Saprolings off of that. Then I'm going to sack those Saprolings. Savra's going to gain me life off those Saprolings. Dina Soulsteeper was on the board. I guess you lost life from every single action I ever took. Playing my deck like a normal human being causes you to die a slow, painful death. I love aristocrats. Then we have Ghoulish Procession. Anytime a non-token creature dies, we make a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed once per turn. So this works on our opponent's creatures dying, our creatures dying, anything. Then we have Skeletal Swarming. Each skeleton you control gets trample. It gets XO, where X is the number of other skeletons you control. And at the beginning of your end step, create a tapped 1/1 black skeleton creature token. If a creature died this turn, you get to create 2 of those tokens instead. So Skeletal Swarming, I really like this card because it makes specifically black tokens for us. There are scenarios in which it actually acts as a secondary win con for the deck. Those scenarios are a bit few and far between, but every now and again you'll find yourself in a situation where you can't close out the game normally, but you can kill your own cards a couple of times and get 6 skeletons on the board, or 8 skeletons on the board, giving each other a lot of power by simply being more skeletons. So Skeletal Swarming, not quite a win con, but it can get us there when it needs to. Then we have Dreadhorde Invasion at the beginning of your upkeep. Lose a life and amass 1, which makes a black zombie token on your board. We're going to sack this as soon as possible so that we can gain draw power and all kinds of stuff, because if we amass again while it's on the board, we don't make a new token. We just put more power into the one token. We have no benefit from putting a bunch of power into the one amass token. Doesn't matter. Then we have Azani Thousand-Eyed. When it enters the battlefield, make a black and green insect creature for every single creature card that is in your graveyard. We have a whopping 32 creatures in the deck, so Azani Thousand-Eyed is going to have plenty of options for its ability at that point. We get lots of black and green insects on the board. Savra sees both sides of those when they die. We can also pay 2 to sack any creature we have on the board to gain a life and draw a card, which of course will trigger Dina Soulsteeper and other cards in the deck. Then we have Ogre Slumlord. When another non-token creature dies, create a 1/1 black rat creature token. All rats you control get Death Touch. That part matters a little bit. The thing that matters the most here, though, is that if you happen to play like Fleshbag Marauder, right? Everybody loses a creature. Ogre Slumlord sees all of those and says, oh, I guess I'm going to create 4 black rats. Oh, Savra saw even more of those deaths. I guess I'm creating 7 black rats. If people let Ogre Slumlord live on the board for more than a turn or two, they're either not drawing removal or they're just making bad decisions. And then we have Valentine, the Dean of the Vein. If a non-token creature would die, you get to exile it instead. So another way that we can cuck other graveyard players. This is not specifically a graveyard hate deck, but so many of the cards just happen to do that. If you exile one of their cards, you can pay 2 mana to make a 1/1 green pest token, or black and green pest token, which has the life gain ability like everything else. And then it has a flip side we're not going to use too much. Every time you gain life, you can pay 1 to put a 1/1 creature counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain trample until end of turn. So there are some niche scenarios where we're going to play this backside because we got a board full of tokens, and we want to go ahead and use an overrun effect to kill people because our aristocrats couldn't make it onto the board for too long. It's not going to happen often, but it is an option you have access to, and I want you to be aware of when you're playing the deck. Then you have Blightmount. Anytime one of your non-token creatures dies, make a 1/1 black and green pest creature token that, of course, has the pest effect. It also gives your pests 1/0 when they swing, which isn't super important, but it is a thing that is written on the card, so again, please don't forget it's there in case you find your pests in the middle of combat. But we're not to the best part. We're not to the best part at all. No. You don't understand. I haven't even talked about the 2 big win cons in the deck, because there are 2 here, and one of them is Lich King's Conquest. Sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, or tokens you want. Then return that many creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if we've lost 5, 6, 7, 8 big, dirtily aristocratic creatures during the course of the game, but we've got a bunch of tokens out from our literal hodgepodge of token generation, we're just going to pay 5 mana, which again, we're a green deck, we can do that. Pay 5 mana, we're just going to get every single card our opponents have gotten rid of throughout the game back from the graveyard in one fell swoop, and then we're going to stare at our opponents and laugh. That's not the only way we're going to do that, though. It's not the only way we are going to do that. So, there is another interaction that I want you to be aware of. Another card that is really, really strong. And I'm going to go ahead and... it's this card. It's this card right here. It is Bringer of the Last Gift. Now, this card, you might know it. You might know it by a different name. Living End or Living Death. So, Bringer of the Last Gift says when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all creatures they control. Then, they return all creatures from their graveyard that were not put there this way onto the battlefield. So, this card is nutty. This card is insane. Just like Lich King's Conquest, all of our stuff that died, we get to pull it back, but there's more. If you play this while Savra is on the board, you get a trigger for every single thing that gets sacked when you do that. I hope I don't need to explain to you why that will end probably most of the time in a game-winning state for you. But if you don't get it, ask your local judge what happens when you play Bringer of the Last Gift with a full board and Savra's on the board. Ask what happens. You'll have a fun time. But anywho, let's go ahead and go to the last part of the deck. We have a land section. It's actually a very, very sparse land section. Because we're playing a green deck, we have access to getting lands out of the deck easier than usual. And I wanted to spare more of the budget to some stronger cards, so we have a bit of a scarcer land package than normal. We have Myriad Landscape to get any 2 lands out of the deck. It's a bit of ramp. Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds, Shire Terrace, and Promising Veins in order to get any land out of our deck onto the boards, because we need to have at least 1 black and at least 1 green on the board as early as possible. We also have 1 searchable land, Haunted Mire, because we have Wood Elves. Anytime you have something like Wood Elves, please make sure you've got at least 1 searchable land in your deck. Really, really important. You will thank me later. Then we have Grim Backwoods. It taps for a colorless. We can also pay 4 mana to sack any creature on our board to draw a card. So this is a sack outlet when we need it to be. Because we are trying to be as strict on the budget as possible, we actually did not include the Command Tower or the Exotic Orchard that we normally would include in decks like this. So instead, we have 13 forests and 15 swamps. Because again, it's a green deck that leans really heavily into 1 color. You shouldn't need to color fix that often, but there is stuff in this deck to help you color fix if you really need to. That all said, that was Savra. Now remember, we are going to be using Savra specifically to burn everybody to death with our aristocrat effects. We're going to keep the board as clean as possible by making sure that she is sacking everybody's creatures. And oh, there's one other thing about Savra you need to know. This is the correct printing of Savra, and if you use any other printing, you're playing Savra wrong. Literally, the power differential in playing this version of Savra is insane. Your deck goes up a power level when you play this version of Savra. For reasons. We won't talk about them. Anyway, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and let me know what decks you might want me to cover in the future. And as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here.
also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here. They would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Nabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.